proceed with extreme caution. Don't ever be rushed or pushed into any relationship. And you'll see when you're dealing with serial killers, or what I like to call social predators, they all use the same methodology, that they try to gain your trust. They try to lure you out of your environment into an environment that they control, and then you're lucky to get away with your life.
It's really fascinating what you just said, because I had a lot of things going through my head, through our various shows, and I think about every one of the serial killers or otherwise that we've covered, and every one of those seem to fit that pattern. It's funny because, there's a instructor in Virginia, Mike Amott, and they kind of have a whole checklist of their own about, what serial killer characteristics are. But, it's just kind of emotionless statistics. But what you're saying is very true, and you can match it up to every one of these guys.
Yes. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I talk about is the what I like to call the top 5 relationship mistakes that people make. And the first mistake that people make is making emotional-based decisions. Emotions are not reliable, and most of us like to speculate, and we do that because it doesn't cost you anything. But the better decisions that you make should be fact-based and based on the fact that you investigated whatever you're looking into. The second mistake that we make in relationships is that we make assumptions without verification. And again, like I said, whether it's a business deal or a personal relationship, you need to not make assumptions based on appearance. When you look at Ted Bundy, for example, he was a classic college student. Matter of fact, he was a college student. Had the preppy look, had the preppy car at the time, which the Crime Museum has possession of if you go past there. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is that you have to always ask and seek the truth. See, oftentimes people will ask a question and they won't wait to hear the truth. What I found is one of the most important questions that was ever asked was asked by Pontius Pilate over 2,000 years ago when he asked Jesus what is truth. But just like as important as that question was, not only do we not wait for an answer, we proceed with just any reasonable explanation. The fourth thing I'd like to remind your listeners back to this relationship mistake is you should always look up before you hook up. In other words, you better determine and check out who you're dealing with. One couple that I always think about when I think about relationships that don't go the right way is this couple that had everything going for them. They had, they were living large, they were blessed, and they lost everything due to the fact of what a stranger told them. And the couple I'm talking about is Adam and Eve. Now, the interesting thing about them is that the adversary, the devil, used the same techniques that serial killers use today. I'm sure he studied his adversary. He waited to find what was a weak point. He moved in. He got their confidence. He made a proposition. He got them out of their comfort zone, and then they lost everything. And that's kind of, what we see today. And the last thing, we should not lean too much on our own understanding. See, when you make decisions based on emotions and speculation, the heart is kind of easy to deceive. Whereas if you take your time, get a time out, and kind of think this thing through, you'll make a better decision than one that you just, jumped on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting because you bring up religion, in a roundabout way, but Albert Fish is kind of shrouded in religion. I mean, if you watch the different documentaries and read about him a little bit, I mean, it seems like almost he thought that he was doing God's work in some sick way. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yes. A lot of your serial killers, when you look into them, a lot are delusional, and they think they're bigger than what they are, or they have a calling to do what they're doing, even though they know it's wrong. And it's something that it can go two ways. If you can believe it, you can conceive certain things, but it's kind of easy to self-deceive yourself. And we see with people like serial killers that they often do things until they get caught, and then they also leave a trail where you can easily catch them. One of the things that always amazed me about dealing and having conversations with murderers is that most of the time, once no matter how bad they were, once they were arrested and in the room where they were being processed, they always seem to have come back down to earth. You expecting to see one thing, and when you went into the room to actually see them, it wasn't nearly what you thought it was. It was just somebody who was taking advantage of a situation and acting out either something they read about or something someone told them or something that they heard about, and just taking it as far as they could until they got caught.
Do you think a lot of times, and again, this is no knock on religion whatsoever, but do you think a lot of times people's over obsessiveness with religion can be dangerous?
Well, I think what has to happen that if you have questions about religion, you need to be able to go to a creditable source that can give you the truth without taking advantage of you. Because, again, when you get into religion, it's all about, there's a spiritual side and there's a physical side. But unless you can understand and get that connection with God, you can easily deceive yourself. Because when you start reading the Bible and reading about the serpent, the devil, you also see that, he comes out of heaven, so he knows the Bible as well as anybody. But he was using it to his advantage and not for the the goodwill of the people.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so and then another jump back to the fish subject. Okay, so the known victims of Albert Fish were children. I mean, so it seems obvious that one of the reasons why he picked children, poor children especially, was because they're easy prey. But
Sure.
Was that all it was, or was there more to it than that?
Well, it's probably the whole, one of the things that I discovered when I was in charge of the sex offense branch here in Washington, D.C., was that 50% of our caseload was 50% of that was date rape, but another 25 or 35% of that was sexual assault. And what I was surprised at was that in the records, a number of people that were perpetrators had also been victims at one time in their lives. So, many of these people had gone from being the victim to the perpetrator. And then I was seeing generations of that. The grandfather had assaulted his children. Now he's working on the grandchildren. And then the grandchildren and the children becoming perpetrators as well. So it's a vicious cycle that needs to be addressed. It needs to be discussed. And it's something that should be taken very seriously. Children are easy to manipulate, and one of the things that you often see child molesters do is, they try to offer them gifts or money or bribery. With children, as with adults, it's important that you stay in your lane, and by that, as long as you're in your environment, you're in control. And these perpetrators know that. Fish knew it. But when you look at some of the things that he did, he went in, he tried to gain the trust of people. And once he would gain their trust, people dropped their guard. And children are easier to manipulate, especially if they're dealing with hard times. Just a listening ear, or somebody who appears to be more concerned about helping them, getting them a meal, getting them off the streets, talking about a video game or something, because sometimes parents are so overwhelmed that they don't have the time to give their children the proper attention. So again, people, who spend an excessive amount of time with other people's children, sometimes you need to take a close look at that.
Great point, and I agree 100% with what you're saying there. And another thing too is when you kind of examine the case of Albert Fish, I think one of the things that he benefited from was the time period in which he lived. I mean, if he lived now, I think it would be a little harder for him to do things under the same circumstances. Can you talk a little bit about that, how, it was easier for kids to go play out on the street than it is now?
Sure. Well, back in those days, the communications was not as effective, but the science now makes it easier to the trained eye to be more effective in dealing with them. During his time, DNA wasn't a strong figure, and what amazed me was the fact that in one of the cases he was involved in, where he had manipulated this family to allow their daughter to go off with him, whom he later murdered. Now, like I said, you have the ability to hire the police. You can do online searches, but the main thing is just not giving people a free will. So I think we're in a better position as a society to capture these guys because the communications, especially on the television and the other electronic devices, something can happen right now, and within an hour, the world knows about it. So in those days when Albert Fish was out there, it took a while and a lot of errors and mistakes on his part before he could be apprehended. But thank God we did have law enforcement personnel and people who were committed to observing these type of situations and being willing to pursue it until justice was addressed.
Yeah, for sure. Blake, I'm going to let you jump in for a bit if you'd like. I know you haven't had a chance yet, and I do want you to absolutely get to talk to Wyndell.
Okay, that's not a problem. It's a pleasure to have you on, sir. It's very interesting stuff. I took a lot of criminal courses when I was in college. I studied a lot of abnormal psychology, and serial killers are what I did a lot of my papers on. So I think it's awesome to meet somebody else who's more of a professional in the field and everything. And I think that's really neat that your book, I'm going to have to check that out. I'm writing a book myself on a fictional serial killer, and I will say putting myself in their shoes, and especially because this person killed children, is a hard thing to do. I mean, I know we're all capable of having that inner darkness, but to write that from a point of view, having two kids myself, it was really hard to put myself in that dark place to get this done. I got to say that.
Oh, yeah. One of the things having worked that, it kind of, my wife always thought I was overprotective of our children, and I was always, beware this and beware that without going into graphic detail. But you come to realize things can happen very quickly. And again, it's better that you tell them something rather than have the regret. I wish I had told them about this, that, and the other, to be cautious and do certain things. And, the biggest mistake that we all make, whether you're professional or a lay person, is that we should never assume things without verification. Because the one thing that a perpetrator, and I call them liars, schemers, and deceivers, are doing, the one thing that they're counting on in order for their plan to work is that you not check anything they told you. Back as I had mentioned about Adam and Eve, had they even checked on the serpent, he had a record. So the best friend you can have in any relationship is a background and a verification check. You absolutely have to do it, and you got to get your children to do it. The one thing that kind of annoys me a lot, because I saw it happen in our reports, somebody will come to the door and knock, and a person, especially an adult, will go to the door and open it without looking or asking who's on the other side. When your children get away from you at home, guess what they're going to do when they go off to college? They're watching you, and they're taking in everything that you do, good, bad, or ugly. So we need to reinforce the importance of not assuming things that are not true, the importance of always asking and seeking what is truth, no matter where it leads, and staying focused and staying in your lane. A lot of times when we do make bad decisions, we don't count the cost, in other words, until it's too late. And these are the type of things that we need to tell our children, because, see, if we don't, the world is going to tell them, and it's going to be they're going to be treated a lot differently. Can you imagine Albert Fish trying to give directions to your child as opposed to you telling your child, hey, don't talk to strangers? And I mean, don't do it.
And that's
so it's that type of tough love that I think we need to make a part of our instructions to our children and loved ones.
That's true. I agree. I mean, the piece in which I'm writing